Hi, so I want to talk today about addiction, trauma and feelings. So there was some report that I read a long time ago saying that people who've experienced any sort of trauma, which is pretty much all of us to some way, shape or to some degree, or have addictions, stop feeling things from the neck downwards. And I really get this, being a recovering alcoholic, drug user, sex user myself, I really relate to this. And all of us experience some sort of trauma. And most of us experience trauma at a time when we weren't able to process the feelings of that trauma particularly well. Which is not our fault, it's just the circumstances that arose at the time. So what happens is that it's so frightening, the feelings that were generated at the time are so scary and so terrifying to us at whatever age we were, that we just turned away, we just looked elsewhere mentally, and we trapped everything inside. And then what happens is when they bubble up and if they become more insistent, we just get really good at so then anything at all that comes up that feels a bit uncomfortable, it reminds us of something else that feels uncomfortable, and so it's it just grows and grows and grows. It's like a boil, it just adds more pressure to the boil. That's an attractive metaphor. Anyway, so when we finally start to notice these feelings, for many of us it's not comfortable. And for many of us, when we start looking for feelings, and this is definitely the case for me, there's not really very much to discern because we've become so very good at blanking it off, at making it numb, at freezing it, that there's not, I ask so many people to check inside their bodies and they kind of go, yeah, nothing at all. And I think sometimes that's because there's some confusion. People think they ought to be feeling some sort of mystical, marvellous, very informed, message or some description. But also for some people, they think that there has to be some very distinct feeling. But in actual fact, for me, where it's always started off is it's just noticing that I don't feel anything. That's where it started, noticing that I don't feel anything or I feel blank. And then realising that there does feel like there's an edge to the blank. And the edge might be the perceived edges of my body, but there does feel like there's an edge. And also, the more I brought attention, the more I realised actually my hands felt warm. So that wasn't blank. It's just like this process of checking and seeing. And then the bits that felt blank or numb or frozen started to melt a little bit. And the metaphor we use in self-compassion is that when you've got really frostbitten fingers, can't feel your fingers, they're numb. We know that the only way to get life back into them is to allow the blood, heat them up, allow the blood flow through. But the process of that is going to be sore. It's going to be sore getting that blood back to the bits of ourselves that have become isolated and frozen. And it's a similar thing with feelings, We've done a really good job of avoiding these for so long that sometimes we start with the frozenness and then we feel a little bit of soreness or discomfort. Good, don't want to do that. We don't have to punish ourselves by bashing away at it and going, no, I've got to sit through this. That's not what we do. We kind of hold this in kindness and go, can I have a little look? Yeah. Oh, and then when we feel that that's enough, we go and make a cup of tea or go for a walk or read a book or watch Star Trek or whatever it is that we do in order to take care of ourselves in that moment. This isn't about beating ourselves up. It's completely the reverse. It's about showing incredible kindness to ourselves. And over time, and we don't have any say in this time frame, all that we can do is bring curiosity and then trust ourselves that we know when to stop looking, when to stop inquiring. Trust ourselves, but we start off with this curiosity, and some days we feel like we've got a lot of resilience and we can just sit in stuff that feels uncomfortable or frozen or tingly or fluttery or sick making or tight, any of those things. And other days we look for a second or two and then we go and make a cup of tea. It's really worth doing. What can end up happening is that because we become so scared of feeling anything that we become, it's almost like we're on a really fine trigger the whole time. So that the moment anything at all, we feel anything at all, we overreact. So coming to terms and making friends with this part of ourselves that feels sore is a really valuable way for us to make friends with our own life. And all of this stuff is about coming to know our own inner landscape, because this is the only way that we can navigate a smoother passage through life, is by owning our own shit, basically. But without the pressure of, I've got to own my own shit, it's all got to happen now because otherwise I'm, don't worry about that so much. But just being curious. If we're curious and if we're willing, and if we're not willing, if we can send out a wish, may I become willing, that's enough. That is enough. That will do. That's beautiful. That is so enough. I still have places in me that are completely blank and frozen. I don't worry about it any longer. If they turn up, I just have a little look if I've got the resilience to do that. This is not going to be a tick in box exercise done thing. This is going to be a lifetime of checking, noticing, adjusting. But my experience shows me that the process becomes more familiar. We get more of a groove for it. We get more in tune with doing it. And so it just becomes a little bit more straightforward to navigate as time goes by.